Dear patrons, welcome to our Zooming with LD series. One of the rightful and rare criticisms of LD Micro is that we don't do a lot when it comes to new age, disruptive, and cutting edge stuff. Just recently, someone called me a prude for not taking more initiative in showcasing companies focused on the future. I'd like to make the claim that LD has always been open to new ideas and has been active in identifying segments of the market that are novel or simply overlooked. Our presenter today is one that piqued my immediate interest because growing up in Los Angeles, I've had my fair share of experiences with psychedelic drugs. Not me in particular, but many of my friends. Most of them swear by it and believe that it has helped them immensely, most notably with anxiety. My personal opinion is that psychedelics will indeed become a large category in the coming decade, and it is prudent to start looking right now. Haven Life, ticker HAVLF, is a company based out of Vancouver that believes that it is the future of psychedelic medicine and wants to create innovative therapies to treat mental health disorders and allow humans to thrive. Joining us to give a firsthand look on Haven is the CEO of the company, Mr. Tim Moore. Tim, thank you so much for spending time with our community today. The floor is now yours.
Morning, Chris. Thanks very much for having me. I'm excited to have this opportunity to speak to people that have shown some interest in psychedelics and in Haven Life in particular. Um, I'm going to take the group through a presentation here and we'll have time for Q&A, but I wanted to start with just a little bit of introduction of myself and my motivation for getting into this space. I'm a career packaged goods person, 35 years in packaged goods. I spent 18 years at Clorox. I spent 7 years running the North America Brita business, both food service and retail. I've worked in consumer electronics. I've dealt with mental health issues my entire life. I have 5 sons. My oldest son is 35. My youngest son is 24. 2 of them have anxiety disorder. My youngest has Asperger's. I had a suicidal 14-year-old, which I wouldn't wish on anyone. My boys are all fine now. My middle son got hit by a drunk driver 6 years ago on Mother's Day and was disabled and became an opioid addict. And I spent 2 years watching him slowly disappear into his couch. Finally, it was cannabis that saved his life, and that became my motivation to get into the cannabis space around 4 years ago. Last year, I got into psychedelics because when I saw the hope and the promise that psychedelics and psychoactives offer for things like anxiety, depression, PTSD, substance abuse, anger management, and even a host of different indications. It inspired me to want to be a part of an industry where we can offer hope to people. And so that brings me into Haven Life and into the psychedelics industry, highly motivated for success, to bring hope to people. Regrettably, the best that people can expect right now with pharmaceuticals is to be numbed enough to get through the day. And I personally believe that path leads to suicide too often because people just get tired of being numb. And what psychedelics offer is the promise of getting back to a normal life, to wake up in the morning and want to live the day, to spend time with a significant other, to go on vacation, to just enjoy life. So that's what we want to offer to people. So that's what brought me here, Chris. And with that, I'll just head over to the deck, which I promise is not 135 pages. It's not painful. So let me just get into that. Should see it up on the screen now. So start with Haven Life has 2 clear paths to revenue. We have a nutraceuticals or a nutritional supplements business, and we have our psychedelics business. And they complement each other in that they both are working on human performance and on cognitive health, but they have very different paths to revenue. You did highlight our mission statement is unlocking human performance through evidence-based research. We are working on extraction of psychoactive compounds from plants. We are really forging a new ground in that space in that there is no GMP compliant way to cultivate mushrooms, and we're going to be the first to do that. So we have our business structure with 2 divisions, Haven Labs and Haven Retail. HAVN Labs was the first company in Canada to get a Section 56 exemption, which allows us to work with psilocybin in our lab to develop protocols and SOPs to support the build out of our mycology lab. So we will be building up, finishing the construction of our facility where we'll be cultivating mushrooms, extracting compounds, refining them, and preparing doses to support the research industry. I'll come back to that in a bit. HAVN Retail is very much a traditional packaged goods company, but again, focused on cognitive health and human performance through products like lion's mane, reishi, cordyceps, and other more novel compounds, which frankly fall under the same rules as things like melatonin, chondroitin, and glucosamine, and there's a very clear path to revenue. HAVN Retail will be in revenue in the second quarter of this year. Our first products, which I'll go over in a few pages, are in production right now. To support what is a very diverse strategy, we have a diverse team. A number of our team have experience in the cannabis space, and we often catch ourselves bringing lessons from cannabis to this industry and reminding ourselves what we need to do differently. And one of the lessons is putting operations people in place early rather than late. We think that one of the challenges that some of the cannabis companies had is they were too slow to bring business operators in. They had stock promoters and growers, and when somebody gave them a lot of money, their best idea was, let's build a 2 million square foot greenhouse, when the truth is nobody's ever had a successful crop in a 2 million square foot greenhouse anywhere ever. So our team, we have a world-class science team backed up with a world-class operations team. I've talked about my background. My chief science officer, Gary Leung, he comes to us from cannabis at Afria. Previous to that, he was the chief science officer at Jameson Labs through their growth over a couple of decades. Our chief psychedelics officer, Dr. Ivan Castleman, is a third generation cannabis person who's been working in the psychedelic space for a number of years now. He has a PhD in plant-based compounds. He has been working on a genetics library for us. We have 24 genetics from Ivan. And Ivan, importantly, has an international connection to other people in the psychedelic space, which provides us with access to other genetics and to compounds that are being used by indigenous people, primarily in other countries. Just a little known fact, I suppose, psychedelic mushrooms grow on every continent except for Antarctica. So there's a broad range of genetics available. On our board of directors, we have Vic Neufeld, who was previously at Afria, and before that also at Jameson Labs, built that company from about 20 million in revenue to several hundred million in revenue. Dr. David Moakler is on the faculty at the University of New England. He teaches PhDs in the psychedelic space. He's been doing research in that area for decades. Alan Oberman was at Teva Labs. He ran Teva North America and South America, as well as Asia Pacific. He's been responsible for the pharmaceutical industry in 65 countries. Rick Brar has a nutraceutical background, as well as cannabis. Tim Laidler is a veteran. He is currently the executive director of the Institute for Veterans Education and Transition at UBC. And Tim brings us an international network of veterans associations that we're collaborating with, most notably Heroic Hearts, which has a mandate to move psychedelics to be legalized to support the veterans who are in desperate need of treatment. It's a sad statistic that we've had more veterans commit suicide than died in the Afghanistan war, simply because there's not adequate treatment for them. Sheila Copps is a former politician. She was the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada. On her plate when she was in politics was helping Indigenous people gain legal access to plant-based and other traditional medications. And David King is from the UK at King's College. He's also involved with the Conservative Drug Policy Reform Group there, which is working to have UK policies around psychedelics changed. We're in a space where there's a convergence of a number of significant trends. 11% of the population globally has some sort of a mental health issue, that number is going up. I believe that we're going to have an echo pandemic come out of COVID with mental health issues. We know that 50% of the survivors of COVID have anxiety or depression. Chris Cuomo went on air to talk about how he's been diagnosed with clinical depression. Then layer on that just the affectation of an entire population, people losing their jobs, losing their business, losing a loved one, not being able to visit people in the hospital, not being able to hold a funeral, having their plans completely derailed, whether it was education plans or career plans or canceling a wedding, being locked down for a year. And then, you know, the people on the front line, medical workers that were in battlefield conditions. You know, I think that we're looking at something on this that's on this emotionally and mentally on the same scale as World War II. When was the last time we built temporary hospitals and temporary morgues? I mean, not in my lifetime. So, you know, we've had that trend, and it's going to continue to grow. The other macro trend we've had is the evolution of the acceptance of mental health. A generation ago, we called those people crazy and we put them in asylums and sanatoriums. Now it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to say I'm being treated. We don't stigmatize people getting treated for cancer, so why stigmatize someone who's being treated for anxiety or depression? And so we've had that evolution. We've also seen the evolution of the public policy. In November, we saw Oregon, Washington, DC decriminalize psychedelics. Where in Canada, we've seen a number of people granted Section 56 exemptions for end-of-life treatment, and that's going to continue to grow. The other mega trend we're seeing on our natural health product side is the continued growth of mushroom products, as well as the continued growth of natural health products. People seeking an alternative to pharmaceuticals, whether it's because of weight gain, sexual dysfunction, dependency, or whatever. They're looking for alternatives, and so we're seeing natural based products, plant-based solutions gaining more and more traction. So back to our paths to revenue. On the retail side, as I said, a very clear path. We have our first 7 SKUs. I'll show those to you in a minute. Ready for launch. We've announced our first retail partners. We've got additional retail partners coming on. We'll also be offering the products through our own e-commerce site. On the lab side, the opportunity that we saw was to build a supply chain of APIs to support the industry. And the reason there's a gap there is, of the approximately 400 trials in field around the world right now, almost all of them are using synthetic psilocybin. And that's fine if you want the pure molecule, but you don't get the entourage effect. There is no full spectrum version of synthetic psilocybin. And frankly, people that are looking for treatment from psilocybin and from other plant-based compounds are rejecting synthetics. Just like in the cannabis world, synthetic THC didn't find much of an audience. I mean, people that want to smoke weed would rather know what kind of music the grower listens to. That's not the molecule they're interested in. So we found that there's a gap. So we're building a robust end-to-end supply chain of APIs. As I said, we'll be cultivating a broad range of genetics, extracting compounds, and offering both full spectrum and isolate compounds to the people that we've been negotiating our supply agreements with. And we've got several of those in place. We're looking to be in revenue before the end of this year in the psychedelic space by selling our compounds to appropriately licensed third parties that are conducting legal research. Our roadmap, the good news is our roadmap is fully funded. We announced a bought deal back in January, $11.5 million. We have about 13 million in the bank that allows our roadmap to be funded through the end of 2021, which is another lesson from cannabis. Don't get yourself in trouble that you have to go to the markets when it's bad timing for markets. So we have a responsible cap table, which I'll show you. We have a responsible balance sheet. We have a responsible cash flow model. So we're, last year we did some preclinical work and some foundation work. We got our Section 56 exemption. This year we're in the application for our dealer's license. We're building out our lab. We're working on formulations, and next year we'll be expanding distribution on our retail business, as well as publishing some of our analytic results. So, you know, our path to revenue this year is secure the dealer's license, which allows us to sell to appropriately licensed third parties. Our facility is being built GMP compliant, which will allow us to export not only to the United States, but also to Europe. In fact, our first customer is probably going to be the University of Wisconsin for a study that they're conducting. It looks like they're first in the queue, and then we'll continue to grow next year. So our facility, you know, frankly, it's pretty easy to grow mushrooms. In fact, you can wander around the forest on Vancouver Island and find them. It isn't easy to grow mushrooms that can be used in FDA-approved compounds because you need them to be GMP compliant. And there's currently no GMP protocols for the cultivation or extraction of these compounds. So that's the facility that we're in construction on right now, is a GMP compliant grow, extraction, and formulation facility. I mentioned veterans. You know, 2/3 of Canadian military personnel don't respond to treatment that's available. We have already announced our support for some retreats as well as some clinical trials with veterans. We have relationships with veterans groups in Canada, the US, and the UK. I just had a meeting yesterday with the UK group to talk about next steps there. And we'll be, you know, continuing to work on additional opportunities with veterans. As I said, the sad reality is we've had more suicides than deaths, and it's a tragedy. You know, when a soldier would die in the field of battle, that there was much ceremony and recognition of the loss of life. When they commit suicide, there's no parade, and so it's a sad thing that we as an industry have the opportunity to correct. By the way, another sad statistic: in British Columbia last year, 2020, we had more deaths of opioid overdoses than we had deaths from COVID, and we didn't shut the economy down for opioid overdoses. So as I said, there's no GMP protocols. That's what we're building. We're in the lab right now doing safety and analytical and quality work to support GMP protocols for our facility so that we can have the standardized psychedelic compounds, APIs, to support the industry. We talk about microdosing, and Chris, you mentioned your experience in Los Angeles, people having experience with psychedelics. The challenge with the psychedelic experience is you're going to lose a day or potentially a weekend because of the consequences of what's known as a hero dose or a macro dose. So our focus is on microdosing, which offers the promise of the therapeutic benefits without the consequence of the hero dose. And the whole industry is very much focused on microdosing as a way to do that. And to be candid, it's also a better revenue model. On the natural health product side, statistic here is Canadian, but the same numbers apply in the US, where 74% of people take some supplement on a regular basis. So we're tapping into an existing consumer behavior. We're not going to try and teach people to do something different. Personally, I take chondroitin and glucosamine for my joints and tart cherry for my gout. And you know, for someone like me to just add another capsule for clarity of thinking or for focus or for immunity is a very easy thing to do. So that's what we're tapping into with our natural health products. So we're leveraging this existing behavior around functional foods and nutritional supplements that is very well established. Our focus will be on food, drug, and mass because 70% of those products are still purchased in food, drug, and mass, as well as nutritional and health food stores. But we know that the direct-to-consumer through e-commerce is going to continue to grow. Obviously, the pandemic has accelerated the growth in that space, but there's still an awful lot of consumption taking place, either curbside delivery or in-store shopping where that's allowed, and we think that that trend will continue. So our health products focus on mindfulness, stress, anxiety, and immunity. Our first 7 are here. These products, as I said, are in production right now, being launched. We are also in formulation of some more complicated products. They take longer to get approval, but offer different benefits. We'll be announcing those as the year unfolds, and we're looking to have our portfolio to 10 or 12 SKUs by the end of the year. We are in the late stages of due diligence to close on a transaction to purchase a manufacturing facility in Vancouver. It offers us 3 key benefits. The first is the ability to quickly expand into an adjacent functional food category, that being functional teas, by bringing mushroom compounds into those teas. The second opportunity is to leverage their existing customer base by taking our natural health products to those customers. And the third is to move some of our manufacturing from contract packing into our own facility to improve our gross margin. We hope to have an announcement soon on the closing of that transaction. As far as comps, there's a lot of people in this space doing a lot of different things. What we're not doing right now is we're not doing ketamine or DMT or 5-MeO or any of the other things that are out there. We're very much focused on psilocybin and related compounds. Where we have this dual approach of both psychedelics and psychoactives. We have a market capitalization that's lower than a number of these other companies, and we feel there's a lot of upside. We are actively looking at M&A opportunities. We think there's ability to buy rather than build, scale and scope, and we're looking for opportunities that accelerate or amplify our core business strategy. So on the natural health product side, that would be buying brands that have an existing footprint and revenue, brands that have formulations with some IP or other capabilities. And on the lab side, that would be additional intellectual capital that would advance our work in that space. Cap table, as I said, about 13 million cash on hand, no debt, very clean. 114 million shares outstanding on a fully diluted basis, and have our cash flows covers us for the next approximately 12 months. Our burn rate is a little under $1 million a month. And I think that brings us right down to the fine print, which I'm not going to read. So, Chris, I'll turn it back over to you.
I was going to say, Tim, that was going to probably take you, just a few minutes, and we'll lose all our audience. There's a ton of questions, okay? And I must say, these are really, really good. So when you are ready, let's go through them.
Ready?
Okay, so this one was kind of borderline. How do you ultimately define depression? And how are psychedelics different than anything else currently on the market that treat it?
How do you ultimately define depression? Well, I don't know the clinical definition of depression, I'll admit that, but I know that it's very well defined. It's not just being sad. I mean, there's Western people in particular are very bad with emotions. Western men are especially bad with emotions. We don't know how to name them. We don't know how to describe them. And so that leads to a lot of consequences. But depression is different than sadness. Depression is the inability to get yourself motivated to get through the day, and just simply feeling overwhelmed all the time, I think is probably the biggest part of depression. What's different is psychedelics actually allow your brain to deal with the issues, the underlying issues that's causing that depression or PTSD, where pharmaceuticals just numb you. It's the difference between getting rid of pain or just covering up pain. And the covering up of pain so that you just plod through the day in a fog is no way to live. And I think that, as I said, that leads to suicide, because people just get tired of being numb. And so we offer the promise of the ability to recover and have a normal life.
I agree with you. In terms of mental health disorders, where do you see psychedelics being most effective?
So in those ones that don't respond, so treatment-resistant depression and PTSD are the two I think that are going to be at the forefront. Anxiety is very important as well. And what we're also seeing is some significant promise for addictive behavior. And addictive behavior is substance abuse, compulsive eating, anorexia. There's a basket of things there around compulsive behavior. Could include a gambling disorder. I don't know. But I think that top of the list to answer your question, PTSD and anxiety and depression. Yeah.
Are there any laws on the nutraceutical side that you need to abide by here in the States?
Yes, you can't make unsubstantiated claims. There's also combinations that aren't legal. So, take alcohol and caffeine are both legal. You can't legally mix alcohol and caffeine. Red Bull with vodka is actually an illegal drink, okay? On the nutraceutical side, there's combinations as well where you have to prove safety. Those two things may be okay separately, but the compounds together, no. So yeah, you can't make unsubstantiated claims. You can only use approved ingredients. You have to make it in an appropriate facility. Yeah, but it's a claims-based challenge.
On the retail side, have you disclosed what your initial SKUs will be and what their average price point is going to be at?
Yeah, so those 7 SKUs have been announced. There's a press release out there. People search for it, they'll find it. Or if somebody wants it, I'll send it to them. And the price point, it's about $1 a day for these, okay? About $1 a day. Some of them are $1.50 a day, but it's about $1 a day.
Got it.
Okay.
How big is the psychedelics market just in Canada alone?
Well, it's only a black market right now. There is no legal psychedelics market anywhere other than, I guess, Brazil and Amsterdam. And so the legal market is very small because you're only servicing the researchers. How big could it be? Massive. Lots of people are self-medicating with microdoses right now through the black market. And as I said, 11% of the population have mental health issues. You're talking multi-billion-dollar industry that even a small market share is going to convert to tens of millions of dollars of revenue when these compounds get approved for use.
Tim, I'm glad you mentioned Brazil and Amsterdam because that is the next question. Where in the world is psychedelics currently legal and what insight have you learned based off those markets?
So in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, mushrooms aren't legal, but truffles are. And they're seen as a functional food there. In Brazil, they're seen as a functional food, and in Jamaica, they're seen as a functional food. They're not treated as drugs in those 3 places. So what you do see is that's where people are doing retreats in Jamaica because you can do them legally there. And so you're able to get more data from those places. I would say of the 3, the most mature right now is Amsterdam, where they have their smart shops where you can go in and you can buy your truffles and you can self-medicate. The one where the most clinical work is taking place is Jamaica.
Oh, wow. Why Jamaica in particular?
Because it's a functional food there, and because it's, it's not a bad place to go on a retreat. In fact, if you, on Netflix, if you watch Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop Lab, season 1, episode 1, she takes her team to a psychedelic retreat in Jamaica. Just watch that and you'll know why it's a place people want to go. It's pretty nice. So.
Understood. Well, I was going to say I was planning. Jamaica is one of the countries on my bucket list,
Okay.
and I don't have to tell you they have deals right now, given the pandemic that is ongoing. How are the mushrooms? I didn't really want to ask this, but I'm going to do it because John has been a long time supporter of ours. How are the mushrooms you sell different than the ones that I had on my pizza last night?
Well, first of all, they have psychedelic compounds in them, and the mushrooms you had last night were not. So there's thousands of different genetics in mushrooms. Most of them are not psychoactive or psychedelic in nature. A narrow range of them, which is still hundreds of species, are psychedelic and psychoactive. The psilocybin mushroom in particular, which converts to psilocin in the brain. So you've got Golden Teacher is one of the strains of that. They're very different because of that. And then within mushrooms, you have broad genetic code difference. So if you think of wine, Cabernet Sauvignon from France is different than Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa. And a true wine enthusiast would say that Cabernet Sauvignon grown on the north side of the hill tastes different than on the south side of the hill. So you have to get very specific with genetics. And I think that's where there's going to be a lot of intellectual property developed in this industry, is people that have a genetic that has a specific combination of compounds in their entourage effect. Certainly that's where our focus is on our initial range of genetics, is what are the compounds that are in there, do the analytics, and then getting the clinical data to show what the consequence of that is.
Next question. Do you believe that there'll be age limit restrictions on your products?
Don't know. I think, first of all, we're not looking at recreational psychedelics at all. We're looking at therapeutic psychedelics. That typically isn't children. You know, these issues, children do have anxiety and depression, so I would hope that they can have access to them. PTSD tends to be an adult-only disorder, but I hope there aren't age restrictions. I think it should be based on the indications. If you can benefit from psychedelics, and you know, it's unfortunate that the psilocybin got caught up in the war on drugs. You know, we've dealt with people. It's like, you know, you get vilified as if you're selling crystal meth. And no, I'm not Walter White, although I look like him. Psychedelics have had legitimate science behind them for decades. John Hopkins University, King's College, Imperial College, NYU, USC, all have centers for psychedelics. It's legitimate science that's been done, but it's been caught up in the war on drugs and treated as a restricted compound, despite very low toxicity, despite no addictive nature to it. So it's very different, and that's why I think that age restrictions likely won't take place. It's not toxic and it's not addictive.
Yeah, I got to say, Tim, I think the war on drugs has been ongoing for what, 40, 50 years now in the US, and it's been a colossal failure, if you ask me. I mean, just the amount of people that have lost their lives, the amount of, you know, corruption. You know, I know that a lot of guys look at Portugal, and I know Portugal is not fair because it's a much, much smaller country. But do you feel that there are other Portugals around the world that are looking to kind of go through that, where they're going to decriminalize pretty much every drug across the board?
Yeah, I think we will see that in more jurisdictions. You know, regrettably, the war on drugs is really a war on patients. The people that suffer are the ones that need access. And what you do is you drive people to illegal supply that's not safe and reliable. So, you know, why do you end up with fentanyl in these things? Well, because it's a way to cut the drugs to make money. What this industry is going to deliver is a safe and reliable supply of psychedelics, and that's our specific space as being in that supply chain. But to answer your question, yeah, I think public policy will continue to evolve. Decriminalization will take place, but I think this will continue to be a regulated product in that you're going to need a prescription. You're not going to be able to go to, you know, a dispensary and pick up mushrooms. I don't see that happening in North America. I think it will be through pharmacists. And you know, it's interesting that people want to understand the legality or illegality of psilocybin. So when Pfizer or SmithKline Beecham develops GlaxoSmithKline develops a new heart drug or a new blood pressure drug, that drug is just as illegal as psilocybin until the FDA approves it, right? So, you know, we're dealing with a compound that's currently not approved for use, that's been caught up in the war on drugs, okay? But everything that we're doing as an industry is being done on a legal basis. And for investors, that's important because there's still this tension in cannabis between, you know, federally illegal and state legal, which we don't have in psychedelics. Everything that we're doing as an industry is FDA compliant, federally legal.
And that goes to the next question. How do you guys ultimately assess quality control on your products? That was a great question, by the way.
So it's actually, you know, it's the same way you do it with any compound. Is you put it through a radiospectroscope or other analytical tool to determine the purity of it. You know, we work with an analytic lab at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver that gives us access to equipment, some of which costs $1 million a year to maintain. And we have a strategic partnership with them so that we can do the level of analytics that's required. But that's how you have to do it. Is each batch has to be verified. You need a certificate of analysis, certificate of purity for each batch of the product. And so analytics is it.
Can you comment on, let me see what the question was. On the competitive landscape, how has it changed over the past 2 years?
A lot of new players come in very quickly. There's a lot of money has come into this space. We're seeing people try different strategies. You know, we've seen people looking to operate psychedelic assisted therapy clinics. We've seen work on DMT, on ketamine, as well as psilocybin. So the space is not crowded yet, but there's certainly a lot of players that have come in a relatively short period of time. We feel that what we're doing is different. We're not aware of anyone else that is building a supply chain of naturally derived APIs. We aren't seeing anyone else on a national basis developing natural health products. The space, there are products available today, but they aren't available at national retailers simply because no one has figured out how to do that, how to conduct business with them. Our team has the skills and experience in order to conduct business with CVS, Walgreens, Walmart, etc., and that's over the horizon for us as well.
Tim, can you comment on the partnerships you've already made on the retail side? And there's a follow-up.
Yeah, so the only one that we've formally announced is with Nestor's Market, which is part of the Pattison Group, which is one of the largest retailers in Canada. We are in late stage discussions with a number of others, but nothing that I can announce yet.
Understood. Okay, so let's go through the Q&A part of the Zoom app. And thank you, Julie, for giving us the definition of depression. A mood or emotional state that is marked by feelings or low self-worth or guilt and a reduced ability to enjoy life. Okay. Wyatt, thank you for the questions. You have quite a few. What revenue level would it take to be? And of course, I think I will probably finish that sentence, cash flow break even.
Not a lot. Like I said, our burn rate is under $1 million a month. Margins are okay. So we can be, I would say, cash flow break even with under 25 million in revenue.
Okay. And then are any of your products patentable?
We are working on patentable products, yes. So the space offers a lot of opportunity for that. Like I said, you've got the genetic side of thing as well as the therapy side. So you can have formulation patents or you can have process patents. We are looking at both.
And then what kind of pushback are you getting from the medical community doing this?
Well, you know, that's ultimately the challenge with any new compound is you need the medical community to embrace it. So you have to look at what's the consequence to their revenue model. And so I think there's going to be, you know, unlike cannabis, which was really hard to educate people on because of some of the stigma around it, with psychedelics, because of the legitimacy of the science behind it, it's a lot easier to do it. And there are a number of doctors that are already educated on psychedelics. So I think that the medical community will be quicker to embrace, sorry about that, quicker to embrace psychedelics than they were with cannabis.
I have to ask, what type of dog do you have?
He is a Wheaten Terrier cross. He is a rescued. He was left in the parking lot at a Walmart as a puppy.
Oh, so, shit, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we had Kindred Bio yesterday, so we were all. I was a cat. I was a Canadian, but believe it or not, my favorite animal is a Canadian lynx.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Are they common in Canada or not unless you go up to like the upper elevations?
No, so in Western Canada, I mean, there's a lot of, let's face it, Canada is a big country with not many people. We have the population of California in a country the size of Russia, okay? Right? We have 5.5 time zones. So, and so there's a lot of empty, right? Trees, rocks, water, yeah, lots of lynx, grizzly bears, brown bears, polar bears. Yeah.
Well, just to add, my favorite show is also Canadian. It's Ice Road Truckers.
Oh, yeah.
And if you ever see anyone who's tuning in, anyone sees an episode of that, you will not complain about your day job. Okay. And then Wyatt's final question, who sets the GMP standards for your products?
So GMP standards are global standards. You can have third-party audits conducted to get a GMP certification. There's a number of different companies that do that, but GMP standards are published and well-known. Ultimately, your customer sets your standards for you because they're going to define the quality that they want. And one of those hurdles will be GMP compliant.
And then Julie had a question, how does this sector growth differ from that of cannabis? Or is it similar in terms of market response?
So I think that, where cannabis was, let's say 8 years ago, you're getting small groups of people that are giving exemptions for treatment. Those groups will grow. We believe that veterans will be a group that will be identified. And in Canada, probably a group that will also get funding. The revenue growth is likely to be faster than cannabis simply because it'll happen on a national rollout basis when the FDA and Health Canada approve. It won't be a rollout, state by state. Like, the MSOs have these very complicated business models where they can't move money between states and they only have a certain number of dispensaries. When we see one of these compounds and protocols get approval, it's going to be available, very broadly, very quickly. So I think you're going to see the revenue ramp up fast once the approvals take place. The next 3 to 5 years is going to be very small and slow because you're going to just see these very focused psychedelic assisted therapies that take place, or the trials that are taking place. But once there's an approval, yeah, I think you're going to see a very quick rise.
And then Mark had a question. The entourage effect includes what else besides psilocybin? Is that how you pronounce it?
Psilocybin, yeah. So there's 300 chemicals in some of the, maybe more, in these mushrooms. I don't know that anyone has the exact understanding of this entourage effect. We know that people that take naturally derived psilocybin have a different experience than people that take the synthetic. The synthetic is a pure singular molecule. The naturally derived has a range of other compounds in there. And so the onset and the experience is different. I can't talk to that personally, but I have talked to someone that's taken both. And he was very specific in the different feelings. And that has been done a number of times, that there's a bunch of anecdotal data around that. It needs to be confirmed in clinical trials.
And then Mark also asked, how will these therapies be marketed and to whom?
So that's a good point. It is a therapy that is augmented with psychedelics. So with blood pressure medication, you take my blood pressure, you give me the pill, you take my pressure, and did it work or not? It's a yes, no, and you know pretty quickly. If I'm treating someone with depression, it's different. It's not just a matter of giving them a pill, because how depressed are you now? How depressed are you now? How depressed are you now? So it's really about having psychoanalysis as well, psychotherapy associated with it, coping mechanisms, changing your environment, habits, overall health of the person. All of those things become part of a protocol for treating PTSD, anxiety, depression, and these other things. It's not just giving them a pill. That's the dilemma we're in now, is we give them a pill and we numb them. We immediately make them less of a problem. And regrettably, when I look in the rearview mirror at how I medicated my children, I medicated them so it would be easier for me. Okay, they were easier to deal with in a medicated state.
Yeah, Tim, I normally don't do this in public circles, but I've seen what's happened with traditional medicine with my own mom, and she is just a former shell of herself. So, I think there has to be a better way. And I'm not saying that all prescription drugs are bad. I'm just saying that a lot of them have adverse effects that you can't really quantify. So, if you told me about this like 10 years ago, I'd be like, no way. But now as a man who's been, kind of implementing a little bit of, cannabis in his life and trying out different things, I just feel a lot better. So kudos to you guys for kind of pushing the envelope forward. And then let's see, there was one other question on the chat side. What is your current R&D spend and what is the forecasted budget for calendar 2021?
So we haven't published the budget, but when we went through the prospectus for our bought deal, we articulated that a significant portion of those funds were going to be used for R&D. Order of magnitude $2 million of that is going into R&D. And separate from that is the construction of the lab. And then the other use of funds is the procuring of our natural health products and the marketing and promotion of those, and then obviously overhead. So R&D is one of the biggest buckets.
Will there be mail order for your products?
For our natural health products, yes. For psychedelics, no. I don't see, well, I guess places like drugstore.com can fill prescriptions through the mail. So the answer would be yes.
And then we're kind of, I think we have about 7 or 8 minutes and we still have 7 or 8 questions. So we'll kind of rapid fire this. Can you please provide clarity on your commercialization strategy? Will you be selling through Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, CVS, et cetera? Thank you for the question, Scott.
Yeah, so like I said, we recognize that 70% of nutritional supplements are still sold through traditional bricks and mortar food, drug, and mass. So yes, we'll be targeting those customers. Have we approached any of them? No. So I don't want to project that we will have success in getting into Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, but we'll absolutely be going and knocking on their door.
This is from an anonymous attendee. If you're looking at M&A activities, will you go back to the market for funding?
Yes, we will.
And there was a couple of people that emailed their questions. What percentage of the company do insiders own, and did any of them participate in the last raise?
So approximately 22% is officers and directors of the company. No, none of those people participated in the last raise. It was a very focused raise. There were only 23 participants in that raise, and approximately a third of it was one major fund.
And then Rob, thank you for the questions. Health Canada Office of Controlled Substances has a 270-day turnaround goal from receiving a complete application for providing responses on controlled substance dealers' license applications. What updates can you provide regarding the license approval process?
So our application went in October. So if you did 270 days from that, that would be July. I am not bullish on Health Canada hitting those numbers. They've got a little bit of a distraction right now with COVID. Countering that, there's fewer applications for cannabis going in, but the focus on COVID has slowed it down. So I think we're expecting our approval to come later than July.
Roger, how many companies already have a controlled substance license to manufacture and sell psilocybin?
Single digits at this point. So it's a pretty elite group right now.
On the Haven retail side, how many products are going to be a part of the late March, April rollout? Nesters, what are the goals for the next rollout and future nutraceutical plans?
So the first 7 products are all in the rollout to Nesters and some additional customers that we haven't announced yet. We have, I don't know exactly how many because we're working in a bunch of different areas, but as I said, the manufacturing facility that we're buying, we're going to be expanding into functional teas. We've announced that. And we've also announced that we're working on some proprietary formulas, the exact number of which I'm not going to disclose.
Roger that. And now this is my favorite time of the segment, my questions. So my first question to you, Tim, is how are your sons doing today?
Great. They're all doing very well. The son that was suicidal, who was the most heavily medicated of all of them with a number of really nasty drugs, dad made a mistake. We went on vacation and I forgot his pills. So he quit his drugs cold turkey. So he's been drug free 17 years now.
Awesome.
That first week was not fun. We were in Cuba and trying to find ways to get through someone that was withdrawing from a bunch of really nasty drugs. My son, who was an opioid addict, is now an entrepreneur. He's got a patent. He's raising money to launch his own company. And they're all doing fine. But it was a bumpy road.
No, I bet. I just, because you told me that story, and I had a friend who was hit by a drunk driver, and it was really, really hard to rehabilitate. And then my other question is, say I cryogenically freeze myself for 3 years, and then we come back and we have a conversation. What will you tell me Haven accomplished operationally as a company?
We will have expanded our retail business into the US. We've announced that we will be approaching US retailers at the end of this year for a launch next year. We will have taken a look at Europe for natural health products. I don't know if we'll be there in 3 years or not, but we'll have taken a look at it. On the lab side, our facility will be open. We will have sold product in at least 3 countries. Because we do already have partnerships in Canada, the US, and the UK. So we'll have sold product in at least 3 countries. We'll be cash flow positive, and we will have closed on 1 or more M&A transactions.
Awesome. So I noticed that you were the president of Clorox Canada. And my neighbor is an executive at Clorox based here out of Oakland, California. How often did you have to come to the Bay Area for that job? And what did you learn while being president of Clorox Canada? I can only imagine your day to day.
So I was in the Bay Area a lot, but I was, I was in San Francisco 12 times before I saw the Golden Gate Bridge.
Wow. Yeah.
I'd arrive at night, I'd go directly to Oakland, I'd stay at the Marriott Hotel next to 1221 Broadway, right? Go to the meeting, and then I'd leave in the dark and go back to the airport. After going 12 times, I finally figured out I should actually see part of the city, so I did. But I was in the Bay Area a lot over the years that I was there. I learned in my time in Canada, and the Clorox business in Canada had been licensed to a third party, so there was no infrastructure. So when I joined Clorox Canada, I was the only employee. I built that to about 400 employees and about $250 million in sales in my time there. And so it was an awful lot of learning around M&A activity. We acquired the SOS business, we acquired STP, Armor All, Glad trash bags. All of those happened while I was there, and building the team and building the infrastructure and doing things like an ERP install was a steep learning curve for me at that point in my career. And I established some great friendships with people through some really tough work that we accomplished together.
I was going to say, we used to have an office on 600 California Street in San Francisco, and I would literally do the 2-block walk every single day. And the only time that I would actually get to see tourist attractions is when my buddies would come over to the city and they wanted to see tourist attractions.
Right.
So I kind of understand that dynamic. I mean, look, it's been such a pleasure, Tim. Seriously, I mean, I've known you for probably an hour and 15 minutes. And as soon as Canada opens up their borders, okay, I'm going to make a flight to Vancouver and we're going to have a good time. I mean, how do you feel What do you think the situation is with Canadian businesses overall? I mean, do you think that you guys have weathered the storm better than the Americans? Do you think we have any timeline as to when the country is going to open up again? What's your stance on all of it?
I think economically it's been devastating. It's going to take a generation to recover. The amount of money that's been spent by the government to support people through this, and Canada. I think some Americans would accuse Canada of being a socialist country. I think that's a fair assessment. There's a lot of government benevolence, so there's been a lot of funding. Notwithstanding that, we've seen a high percentage of restaurants in particular fail. They won't be reopening. A number of small retailers that won't be reopening. So it's going to be challenging. I think emotionally is a bigger issue. I mean, I feel for teenagers, that are. I think they're probably emotionally the hardest hit group. As far as opening the border, not anytime soon, and
Yeah.
that's challenging for me. So what I didn't tell you earlier, Chris, is I'm in a long distance relationship. So I'm from Toronto, I work in Vancouver, and my fiance is in Las Vegas.
So wait a second. So you can come down, but I can't go up, correct?
That's correct. But when I return to Canada, I have to test before I board my flight. I have to test at the airport. I have to quarantine at a government approved hotel for 3 days and then quarantine for 14 days. I've done that.
It's basically a month.
I've done that twice, and spending 14 days alone in a hotel room. It's a very comfortable prison cell, but it very much is a prison cell.
So what do you do? Do you bring traditional books? Do you bring comics? Do you bring your laptop? What's kind of your go-to?
Well, I work. I mean, I'm working in a room right now that's the size of a hotel room, so that doesn't really matter. And I have I have my resistance bands because, like I said to you, I've kind of reinvented myself and got myself fit. So I use my resistance bands. I turned 63 in 2 months. I don't feel that old. I get accused of not looking that old sometimes, and very focused on my personal mental health and my physical well-being.
You bet. Where can people find out more information on Haven?
Havenlife.com.
Excellent.
Okay.
Well, look, well, I'm going to see you on the other side, and you're going to tell me when you're coming to Vegas, because I just have this weird feeling that you have a lot of insight on a lot of, matters that I need a lot of help with. So with that, it's been such a pleasure, genuinely. If I didn't answer any questions that were asked, I apologize. Please feel free to email me at chris@ldmicro.com, and I'll forward it to him and Joe. But for that, again, thank you for everything. We will be in touch.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.